Before humans learned to hunt, they still had to eat. That sounds obvious, but it creates a much more interesting question than most people ever stop to ask. If there were no spears, no traps, no organised mammoth hunts, no great heroic scenes of men taking down giant beasts, then what exactly kept the first humans alive? The answer is less glamorous than most people imagine. For a very long time, humans were not apex predators. They were not even particularly impressive omnivores. They were small, vulnerable primates with bad claws, mediocre speed, no armour, and a nervous system that had every reason to be afraid of almost everything bigger than a dog. So before hunting became a reliable strategy, early humans survived the way many intelligent animals survive. They took whatever they could get: fruit, tubers, nuts, seeds, insects, eggs, honey, dead animals left behind by bigger predators, bone marrow cracked out of carcasses after lions and hyenas had already eaten the best parts, fish if they could grab them, shellfish if they lived near water, lizards, frogs, small mammals, and anything slow enough, weak enough, or stupid enough to be caught without risking death in the attempt. In other words, the first human menu was not noble. It was practical. If you go back far enough, before Homo sapiens, before Neanderthals, before the kind of humans most people picture when they hear the word ancient, you reach creatures like Australopithecus and early Homo. These were not hunters in the classic sense. They did not have the anatomy for it. Their shoulders, arms, grip, and lower body mechanics suggest creatures still deeply tied to climbing, carrying, and opportunistic ground movement rather than full-scale pursuit hunting. What they did have were eyes that could find things, hands that could carry things, and brains that were slowly getting better at remembering where useful things tended to be. That matters more than it sounds. Because before hunting is a skill, eating is a scheduling problem. You have to know where ripe fruit appears. Which roots are worth digging up? Which trees hold eggs at the right time of year? Which insects are edible? Which dead animals are still safe to cut into before other scavengers return? Which bones are worth smashing because there is still fat-rich marrow inside? That is not random feeding. That is ecological intelligence. One of the strongest clues we have comes from teeth. Teeth preserve the story of diet better than almost any other part of the skeleton. Microscopic scratches, pits, chips, enamel wear, and isotope patterns can all tell us what kinds of foods an ancient hominin was regularly chewing. And what the evidence suggests is that early humans ate a broad mix of things rather than specializing too early in one strategy. Heavy wear on molars suggests lots of hard or gritty plant food. Cracking and chipping can suggest seeds, nuts, roots, or even bits of sand and dirt mixed into food. Isotopy analysis in some early human species suggests the consumption of both plant-based foods and animal protein, but not always in the proportions people imagine, which means the image of the first humans as born hunters is probably wrong. They were born gatherers who got good at taking advantage of accidents. Imagine this. A leopard kills an antelope and drags it into the shade. It eats the organs and the soft tissue first, because that is the easiest and most nutritious part. Then it leaves. Not because it is finished forever, but because something disturbed it, or because it plans to come back later. If you are a small early human and you find that carcass before the leopard returns, you have access to something extraordinary. Not clean meat laid out on a plate, but scraps, tendons, fat, tissue between bones, a half-open ribcage, long bones full of marrow, brain tissue inside the skull if you know how to get in. This is where stone tools become revolutionary, not because they immediately turned humans into hunters, because they turned humans into better scavengers. The earliest stone tools we know of from places like Gona in Ethiopia around 2.6 million years ago were simple flakes and cores, sharp edges, nothing elegant. But elegance was not the point. The point was access. A lion can kill a zebra. A human with a stone flake can access what the lion cannot easily carry away or what it leaves behind. Cutting through hide matters. Breaking bones matters. Scraping flesh matters. Suddenly a carcass becomes more useful to a creature with hands and stones than it was to many other scavengers. That may be one of the most important shifts in early human food history. Not we learned to kill, we learned to get more out of what was already dead, and that is a very different kind of intelligence. There is also strong evidence that insects mattered far more than modern people like to imagine. This makes people uncomfortable, because insects do not feel like real food to modern industrial societies. But from a survival perspective, insects are excellent food. They are dense in protein and fat. They are everywhere. They are slow compared to antelope. They do not kick back. And children can gather them. Termites, grubs, beetle larvae, ants and locust-like insects would have been easy calories, especially in seasons when fruit was scarce and roots were hard to dig up. Chimpanzees still use sticks to fish termites from mounds. If modern apes do this, early humans almost certainly did too, and likely with more creativity once tools entered the picture. Honey mattered too. Honey is basically prehistoric sugar concentrate. If you are a calorie-hungry primate trying to support a growing brain, finding honey is like discovering energy in its purest form. It is risky, because bees are not cooperative business partners, but the reward is high enough that people have been risking stings for it for hundreds of thousands of years. Then there were roots and tubers. These are easy to ignore because they are not dramatic. Nobody makes a movie called Dawn of the Tubers. But they may have been some of the most important foods in early human history. Underground storage organs, roots, bulbs, tubers are reliable. They do not run away. They are often available in dry seasons when fruit disappears. They contain starch, which is energy. And once humans learned how to identify the safe ones and process the bitter or toxic ones, they became a serious survival foundation. This is one reason hands matter so much. You can dig with a stick. You can pry with a stone. You can carry what you find. You can return to the same patch later. You can remember where the good ones grow. That kind of repeated, place-based food knowledge likely mattered just as much as any weapon did. And yes, eventually humans did become hunters. But that came later, and it probably came gradually. First came opportunistic scavenging. Then maybe stealing kills from smaller predators when the risk was manageable. Then chasing small, weak, trapped or juvenile animals. Then coordinated pursuit of larger prey once weapons, planning and social organisation became good enough to make that less suicidal. This is a critical point. Humans did not wake up one morning and become mammoth hunters. They climbed there one terrible meal at a time. Before the hunting phase, the diet was patchwork. Seasonal, risk-sensitive, local. If you lived near a coast, maybe shellfish mattered. If you lived in woodland, maybe fruit and nuts dominated. If you lived near open savanna, scavenged meat and marrow may have become more common. Different landscapes produced different humans long before they produced different cultures. And that is what makes this question so interesting. There was no single prehistoric menu. There was a strategy. Take what is available. Use what you know. Waste nothing. Risk as little as possible. And when the world offers you a dead antelope before it offers you a live one, eat the dead antelope. That strategy may not sound heroic, but it worked well enough for brains to get larger, tools to get sharper, cooperation to get tighter, and eventually for hunting to become a real and repeatable part of human life. But before humans became hunters, they were something more humble and probably more accurate. They were survivors who lived below the top of the food chain and figured out how to feed a growing mind in a world full of leftovers. And honestly, that might be the more impressive achievement. Because killing something with a spear is dramatic. Building a species out of roots, beetles, marrow, and whatever the lions forgot to finish is much harder to romanticize, which is probably why it does not get talked about enough.